New Zealand's men abandoned their one-day tour on the brink of their first match because of a specific security threat. England then decided to withdraw both their men's and women's teams from the series that was due to take place there in October. Now, no security threat was cited, but the England and Wales Cricket Board said there were increasing concerns about travelling to the region. In a statement, they said that going ahead with the tour would, quote, add further pressure to a playing group who have already coped with a long period of operating in restricted COVID environments. Now, it's a statement that's raised all sorts of questions. It's raised all sorts of strength of feeling. And this is what the Pakistan Cricket Board chairman, Ramiz Raja, had to say to the BBC World Service about the situation.
We have gone out of our way to accommodate international sides and have acted very responsibly as part of the ICC cricket fraternity. Just imagine it was Asian bloc blocking England in stressful times. It's no time really to remind England what we did, or Australia or rest of the world. During pandemic, we were the first ones to come and support England, for example, but we didn't get that response from New Zealand. We didn't get that response now from England.
So, quite a passionate response from Ramiz Raja. And Jim, understandable the disappointment. I mean, the strength of feeling, there's strength of feeling in Pakistan. There's also a lot of strength of feeling on the England side from England cricket supporters feeling almost quite ashamed at the way that their team has been pulled out of this, because there was no explicit use of the word security in that ECB statement. And yet discussions seem to only come about since New Zealand pulled out of their tour of Pakistan. So do Pakistan have a right to feel let down here?
Oh, my word, they do. And this has been reinforced in many ways by the utterances from the British High Commissioner, who said there was, as far as he could see, no security threat. So when you put that together with the fact that it was only going to be 4 days in Pakistan, 1 day of quarantine, 2 T20 games, it's a bad look given how well Pakistan have supported the game in England and in New Zealand. It's a very, very bad look. And it makes you think that the ECB is giving in to the pressure from the players, not to, in inverted commas, overload them with bubbles, and to make sure that they mollify them to the extent that they'll be happy to go to Australia and play in the Ashes. That seems to be the priority at the moment. So I think they've made a meal of it myself, but there may be other reasons that people can come up with, but I haven't seen anything in the British media that would suggest the ECB are on the right path with this decision.
Does seem to be that there's been a lot of pressure coming from the playing side, albeit I understand that the players, weren't approached on an individual or even on a team basis as such. But of course, there are bodies that represent the players. The PCA, of course, being the main body. There are the player partnerships as well for the men's and women's teams. And this, of course, was going to be the first time that England's men had toured Pakistan since 2005, and the first time ever for the women. That goes into the mix just to highlight the significance of this tour. And it'd been in the diary for some 9 months. I understand that the ECB chief exec, Tom Harrison, has been on holiday, and he didn't even make the call personally to Wasim Khan, the PCB chief executive, to convey the decision. And I have been covering the England women's internationals in the last week, as I mentioned, and the day after the announcement, we requested to speak to somebody from the ECB on the matter. We were told nothing else would be said above and beyond the statement, and that meant that the England women's captain, Heather Knight, as a playing captain on that day, was left to face questions from the media as her team were trying to play a one-day international. And this is what she said on the matter.
We've found out that the board have decided to pull us out, and accept that decision obviously is well above our heads, and it's a very complicated situation. It's obviously a little bit sad, but also the board's trying to look after us a little bit, so we accept that, and just a bit of a shame, but hopefully we can go there again in the future.
So how much of it was the ECB? How much of it was the PCA? I'm not sure it was quite fair to leave Heather Knight to field questions on it in the absence of any ECB bosses explaining the situation. But Sunil, we know there was no mention of security in that statement. And as Jim mentioned, the British High Commission has clearly stated that they supported the tours. The security advice for England had not changed. I don't even think, from what I understand and from speaking to sources in Pakistan, that a compromise was even discussed. But, if security was the issue, then play in the UAE. If it was about bubble fatigue, then take a different set of 15 players. But again, not that the women's team could have the same bubble fatigue as the men. They haven't been doing the same level of international touring. But, should a compromise of sorts been reached?
I don't think a compromise was even on the cards from the way that the statement came out from the ECB. Playing in the UAE, I don't think was an option at all, because it defeated the entire purpose of playing in Pakistan, the optics of playing in Pakistan, and that was the whole purpose of this.
Yep.
So that really would not have been a solution. And if I understand what you're saying correctly, a different set of players, even if you had to say, we're sending these 15 players, obviously the implication might have been, they're expendable or they're not going to play the Ashes. And lastly, the PCB would have been well within their rights to turn around and say, we're sending a second string team. There are too many wheels within wheels, and I think it just turned out to be a lose-lose situation for everybody.
And the curious thing about the fatigue argument is that for the England men, these were going to be warm-up matches for the T20 World Cup. Presumably, they still need to play some warm-up matches. So it's not as if cancelling this part of the tour has suddenly freed them up to have an extra 2 weeks, 3 weeks at home with families. They'll still need to get to the UAE. They will still need to have warm-up matches. It just felt like a fudge, whichever way you look at it.